In this episode, we are discussing how to overcome and destroy your loneliness once and for all in just 90 days. And before you're like, there's no way it's possible, I'm living proof that it is. So let's go. Welcome to Accidentally Intentional, where we are on a mission to destroy loneliness by building rich, meaningful friendships. And in this episode, we're going to get super tactical and break down exactly how we can all do this. These are lessons I learned from a framework that I created in order to ultimately destroy my loneliness. Now, if you watched the last episode, you learned that how I ended up destroying my loneliness was by setting a New Year's resolution to eat a meal with someone different on my college campus every single day and get to know their story. And it ended up being so incredibly transformative for me that I did it for 2.5 years straight. And if you want to hear that whole episode and the whole crazy story, click the link up here, and then I'll meet you back here. But if you want to just pick up where we left off, that has become my passion since I left college, which is now 12 years ago. But I realized that we are so close. We are literally almost one question away from building meaningful connections and friendships and ultimately relationships in our lives. But we let some small things get in the way and take us down and take us out for the count. And so we're going to discuss exactly what I needed to do in order to build those meaningful friendships in my life, the ones that I had always wanted. And in turn, you're going to be able to do the same. So let's jump right into it. The first thing that you need to think through, step one, is actually asking yourself, what do I want? Now, before you're like, okay, this is stupid, this is not going where I thought it is, hang on. Because have you thought about what you want in a friendship? I mean, in a lot of things in life, we kind of just go after it, but we don't exactly know what we're aiming for. And I think the same could be said for friendships. Sometimes we're just like, I just want somebody to talk to. But if you really think about it and write down a couple characteristics, that's actually going to give you a target to aim for and give you an idea of the types of people and types of conversations you're going to want to have in order to find out if somebody is going to be that ideal friend for you. And obviously people can say the same about dating. It's just important to have an understanding of what you actually want and therefore what you actually don't want. And with that question, you need to also decide that I don't want to be lonely anymore. Because once you make that decision, as I made that decision, it changed everything because it no longer became excuse after excuse. I'm too scared. People will like me. People won't like me. People will reject me. No, it became a matter of, it doesn't matter because I'm choosing not to be lonely anymore. So step one, figure out what you want. And I would say write down a couple of those character traits that you're looking for in a friend. Why? Well, because of number two. Are you this friend? Step two is actually figuring out and doing a self-assessment. Am I this type of friend? Because if we are expecting other people to be a friend and a type of friend that we aren't ourselves or aren't already, that's a futile effort because those types of people are looking for the same thing. So it needs to be this back and forth kind of dance and this mutual understanding of this is what I'm looking for. This is what I want to be, and this is who I am. And along with that self-assessment of, am I this type of friend? Let's just think about the fact that it's going to cost us something. What will it cost you to be that type of friend? I know for me, it was going to cost my pride, honestly, because I'd have to humbly and awkwardly ask near strangers to grab a meal with me so I could get to know them. I mean, that's extremely exposing and vulnerable and puts you in a position where it's definitely not comfortable at first. So that's one of the things it cost me. It definitely cost me vulnerability in order to be that type of friend because you have to let people in to a degree to understand who you are, what you're about, what you want to do, what you want to be, etc. So cost pride, cost vulnerability. Financially, there was some cost to it. Now, grabbing coffee, that's a cost. Grabbing dinner, That's a cost. If you're going out in person, and there's ways around that so that there doesn't need to be a financial, hit making friends. I'll talk about that later. But the thing that it cost most was time. So much time. But I would never complain about that, because that amount of time that I spent and still do spend today creating, building, cultivating, nurturing rich, meaningful friendship was absolutely worth it to me. And hopefully you're finding that you are worth it too, and that the gift of your time is one of the greatest gifts you can give someone, and one of the greatest gifts to ever receive from somebody else. So what's it cost? Think about any other that it's going to cost you, and mentally prepare for the fact that, okay, this is going to cost me something, and I believe I'm worth it because I'm going to choose to not be lonely anymore. And we talk about the cost of time because according to research done at the University of Kentucky, they actually have found that it takes an average of 90 hours to create a friendship with somebody else. Now, this means going from acquaintance to friendship. We're not even saying close friendship yet. That actually takes 200 hours, but we're just saying 90 hours. So I'm thinking about this in 90 days, if we want to destroy our loneliness, that means you're putting forth 1 hour effort a day to cultivate a friendship, open the door for a friendship with somebody else in your life. Heck, it could be with 90 different people. Now you're thinking, well, I literally only have 1 hour with them. If that's true, it's not 90 hours with one person. Sure, but every single opportunity to sit down with somebody, get to know them, is an unbelievably valuable opportunity, because you're getting to see who a person is and whether what you want in life and what they want in life actually match up and align with your friendship goals. And I'm going to keep hitting on the importance of friendships and relationship, because the longest study ever done, it was done by Harvard. It studied people through almost 90 years, and they were able to discern and find, undoubtedly at the end of that research, that the number one predictor of longevity is the quality of your friendships and relationships in your life. So we have to give time to what's most important to us. And if you want to live a long, rich, happy life, relationships, friendships are the way to go about this. So I hope by this point you're believing that that opportunity cost of time is well worth it. Number 3, third step, is take the risk of going first. C.S. Lewis has this great quote that says, "Friendship is born the moment that one man says to another, 'Oh, you too?'" And that quote just blesses my whole soul, because isn't that so true? It's when we find that we have a commonality, no matter how big or small, with another person, that we realize, oh man, like we have something to bond over. We have something to discuss. And that opens the door for conversation, vulnerability, friendship, lifelong friendship for all we know. So it's a beautiful entrance to this going first concept, because going first is ultimately what creates connection. Now, sure, connection can happen another way, but one thing that I realized really early on in this New Year's resolution I created for myself all those years ago was that if I was expecting somebody else to want to have lunch with me, I was going to be waiting a very long time, and that I actually needed to go first by giving, and in so doing, give someone the gift of going second. And yes, I talk about how awkward it was in the previous episode, but what's crazy is that people are so much more willing to accept an invitation or a request to help than we actually think we are. Oh yeah, prove it. Okay, well, there was a study done at Stanford in 2017, and the results of the study showed that it actually is 1.5 times more likely for someone to accept us than we think it is. And all it takes, oftentimes, most often, is going first. Hey, do you want to go to coffee with me? No, I barely know you. Yeah, no, that's why I want to go to coffee because I'd love to get to know you better. Yeah, that might sound awkward to you, but so what? You can do it anyways. You can do it scared. You can do it with any reservation you may have in your mind because you go back to that core belief at the beginning that I don't want to be lonely anymore and I am worth building rich friendships in my life. So by going first, make the ask, make the plans. Let me tell you how I make plans, okay, today, because I learned this the hard way. Whenever I want to get to know someone better, and I basically only know their name or only know them in the context that I see them every week or something like that, I say, hey, I'd love to grab coffee sometime because I want to get to know you better. I want to get to know you outside of the context of, work, something like that. And they might be like, oh yeah, for sure. So then I hold them to the fire of sorts because I whip out my phone and say, awesome, let's put it in the calendar right now. When's a good time for you? Now, the reason I like this approach is because it gives you a sense of what's actually going to happen and whether this person has the desire to be reliable and do what they say they're going to do. So if they're like, oh man, like I don't know, I'm gonna have to get back to you, I'll be like, yeah, no problem. Let me follow up with you tonight, tomorrow, once you're able to check out your calendar, and then we'll see it from there. Now, you might be like, well, that makes you sound incredibly desperate. I don't agree. I think that the goal is being intentional. And 85% of the time, still to this day, I'm the one who initiates the plan. I'm the one who goes first. And you don't need to be afraid to do the same because that is how it starts. Because if we want to be people that destroy our loneliness, then ultimately we have to go first. And along with that, it's important for us to be people that do what we say we're going to do. I mean, isn't it so disappointing that it feels like we can rely on so few people nowadays? I mean, it's just disheartening. So why don't we, as the famous quote says, be the change that we wish to see in the world? And along with going first, you can create opportunities for connection. There really are very few excuses that are valid when it comes to making friendships because you can join IM leagues, you can join book clubs, you can pursue avenues that are hobbies you enjoy and meet people that way. You can go on walks with people. You can invite people into your home for coffee, for a meal. That's a way to be vulnerable by showing people, hey, this is my business. This is where I live. And yeah, can't hide anything now. I think that's a great gateway to get to know people. And if you are still skittish about meeting people in person, which I would say is the best way, because there's this tactile human face-to-face interaction that happens that makes a connection so much stronger. But if you are not ready to do that, then I would recommend some online communities such as kinship.co. They basically facilitate conversations for you to have with strangers. And it's not as awkward or scary as it sounds because there's a facilitator to help people get to know each other a little bit better. So going first is honestly absolutely paramount. Let's release the expectation of having other people do things for us and actually be that change agent in order to ultimately take control and autonomy of what you want, which is building rich friendships. Number 4, in order to find your ride or die friend, what's necessary is going to be vulnerability. And that makes us clutch our pearls sometimes because we're like, no, I can't trust people. You don't know what somebody's done to me. I'm not ready to be hurt again. Well, here's what I need to say to this. I've been hurt so many times. And that's a risk. Hurt is a risk in any friendship and relationship in life. And you won't know whether you can trust someone until you start to trust someone. Now, what I'm not saying is the moment you sit down with someone, vomit your whole life story to them. No, that would be overwhelming and, dare I say, inappropriate. That's something that happens through 1,000 small ways to build and gain trust. But the point is, vulnerability helps you learn whether you can gain someone's trust or not. And I like to think of vulnerability sometimes as like a Western duel, that it's like whoever shoots first wins. Now, that's kind of a silly analogy, but honestly, it's pretty crazy what happens when you choose to be vulnerable first, how people often return in kind. Like it's not even intentional. You're not trying to manipulate the situation, but there's something beautiful about when you hear something about somebody that they hold somewhat close to their chest. It actually makes us become more invested and more endeared to them, that they went out on a limb to trust us with something. And we love the idea of reciprocity. We want to feel like we're contributing and participating in something. And there's this concept of generosity begets generosity. And so when you're vulnerable, you're being generous with your heart and your soul and your mind. And typically, in most cases, I found other people want to do the same for you and with you. Every human's desire is to be fully seen, fully loved, fully known. And if that's our desire, then we know that there's going to be some risk involved in that, because we have to figure out who fully sees me, who fully knows me, and who, in spite of fully seeing and fully knowing me, loves me as well. So how do we go from acquaintance to someone that barely knows anything about you to a friend, that 90-hour gap, for instance? Well, there's 3 types of conversation that need to happen. And I think conversation and questions are very closely tied to vulnerability, because there are ways that you can utilize questions to actually make yourself vulnerable to somebody else as an olive branch of, hey, like, I believe I can trust you. Let me give you an example, okay? Let's say that I want to pursue a career in finance, for instance, and I'm just kind of getting my foot in the door. I want to talk to somebody who knows a lot more about it to give me the ins and outs, but I don't want to necessarily use them. I genuinely want to build a relationship, a friendship with them. And so one of the best ways to do that is asking someone for advice. And you're like, oh my God, I'm not going to ask someone for advice. Nobody wants to help me. I want to go back to that stat that I shared from the Stanford study, that people are 1.5 times more likely to want to help, accept you as you are, accept a request, accept an invite. So why not go first and go on a limb and say, hey, what is some advice that you could give me on this? Or better yet, what makes someone successful at fill in the blank? I'm going to give you another example in a minute. But as we're talking about cultivating friendships, there's 3 types of conversation styles that need to happen in order for a friendship to grow. I found this very fascinating. It's research by Dan McAdams. It's otherwise known as the 3 levels of intimacy, but it's not romantic intimacy. It's just, hey, into me, you see, as in your heart. So we usually get stuck on level 1, which is general traits. Said another way, it's small talk. This is occupation, age, gender. What do you do? That's a small talk kind of conversation. But that's important to have some small talk, because our brain has to learn the basics before it can go deeper, because it's on high alert to signal to us if we're in danger or if we can't necessarily trust someone. So I would say that a lot of the times we get stuck in just level 1 is because we've been hurt before, we're afraid of getting hurt again. Yet, that's important to note. And also, it's still worth bumping up against that signal that your brain might be trying to tell you, don't go any further, don't go any deeper, by slowly wading a little bit deeper in the water, per se. Which brings us to level 2, which is a necessary part of friendships. And it is categorized as personal concerns or motivations and values. These types of conversations are basically things where you're finding out, like, what gets you up in the morning? What's exciting you recently? What are you working on that's like just setting your heart on fire? Maybe it's asking about family members. Those are personal concerns as well as motivations and values, and that's the next level that you can go to in conversation with someone. And that is a part where you're actually able to start sharing a little bit of vulnerability, because the more that you're learning about someone, the more you're able to relate, empathize, and share your experiences. And sometimes you might have to go first. Sometimes you might have to be like, hey, I am really pursuing this dream. And you share the dream with them. That's a sense of vulnerability. Vulnerability doesn't need to be like, my deepest, darkest secrets. Yes, that is vulnerability, but that's not all that vulnerability is limited to. Vulnerability is essentially just sharing your heart, sharing parts of you with somebody else. So level 1, small talk. Level 2, motivations and values. And then level 3, which is the deepest level of conversation, which can lead to vulnerability again, is what's called self-narrative and self-disclosure. These are the types of conversation that helps you understand and predict emotion really deeply. These are questions like, what is your deepest fear? What is your biggest passion? What drives you? Who is your role model or hero? And then following up on it. Those kind of conversations are where you really start to get to know somebody's heart. And an example of a question that teetered between level 2 and level 3 when I started doing all of these meal dates, as I called them, with different people on my college campus, it all really changed when I started asking this question. Hey, I'm really struggling with something in life, and I honestly don't know how I'm going to get through it. So I'm sharing vulnerability first. I'm going first. So then I say on top of that, is there a time in your life where you had a moment where you didn't know that you were going to make it through, but then you did? And what did you do? What helped get you there? Now, this was a profound shift in the conversation, as I said, because now people know something about me. I shared my vulnerability, and they, in kind, have the opportunity to encourage me, step alongside, and actually follow up and continue walking with me through that, to be there, because we actually innately desire to be there for people. Why? Because we want people to be there for us. So I wanted to give that overview of the 3 types of conversation that can lead to vulnerability and connection, and using questions to steer conversations can ultimately help get you there. And by the way, if you are liking the direction of this episode, we'll actually have a free downloadable guide called the 5 Steps to Building Rich, Meaningful Friendships. And you can click the link in the description in order to get that. It goes into more depth as to what we're talking about today, as well as gives you a worksheet to help guide you in this quest to building rich, meaningful friendships. And at the very bottom of it, it shows you ways to connect with me in case that you are looking for one-on-one personalized coaching, because you're the type that's like, I want to do this, but I don't know if I can do it on my own, and you want accountability to do it. I got you. I'd love to walk with you in this. So make sure you click the link below to sign up and get that free downloadable guide. My gift to you, because I believe in you. I believe that you're worth it. Now, we covered a lot of ground in this episode, and you might have gotten this far and said, cool, what you said, but, and then you start going through this list of objections and thoughts that are swirling in your head, such as, I don't really need friends. I don't think people like me. I don't actually believe that I'm worth having those friends. I'm awkward. Any of those objections that you're having, hey, it's okay, you're safe, you're welcome here, but you're gonna want to subscribe to get the very next episode, because in that next episode, we are squashing the assumptions and replacing those soundtracks that we have in our head with the truth, ultimately. And when you unlock that mindset, it unlocks the confidence you need to take the first step. So make sure you subscribe to get that episode where we are destroying those assumptions that are ultimately holding us back. And hey, if you like this episode, then you're definitely gonna like this one too, because we're talking about how to ask better questions. Like we said at the end of this episode, a very critical part of building friendships. So make sure you click on this one, and I'll see you over there. Hey, know that I believe in you, and you are worth building rich friendships. We'll see you next time.